You're listening to the Black Eagles podcast with Sinan Schwarting and Kaan Bayazi.
Ahmet Dursun Sergen aldı. Sergen Bülent yan yana. Sergen Bülent. Sergen. Yanında Tümer var. Tümer'e doğru at. Tümer gitti. Tümer topu aldı. Sergen aldı. Gol! Gol! Sergen attı.
İbrahim'in pası. Roma. Şimdi Ahmet. İkinci gole gidiyor Beşiktaş. Ahmet.
Welcome back, everybody. Episode 96 of Beşiktaş International's The Black Eagles podcast. We are here this holiday season. In fact, it is Christmas Eve as we record, and probably when I'll release it. So, it's been a rough couple of weeks for us Beşiktaş fans. But so here's a little Christmas gift for you listeners, something to listen to. If you're with your family during this season, trying to think of some excuse to phase them out for a little while. Put on your headphones. Put on your headphone. Here we go for episode 96. I am, of course, Sinan Schwarting, live from New York City. And today, my co-host, back from the nether regions, it's Evran Akman. How you doing, man?
I'm alright. How are you?
Good. You won't know this, but in post-production, we're going to have Christmas bells and everything. So this is our big Christmas episode.
Wow, exciting. The Muslim soccer team's Christmas episode.
That's right. Sorry, weird noises there. Of course, Jesus is a pretty big character in the Muslim world as well, to be fair. But I am not religious at all. I do have a Christmas tree, however, and I have a ton of presents from my kids. So I don't really know. It's like a nothing period for me personally. But anyway, for those out there who are enjoying it, you do that. You do you. We don't have a lot of good news to talk about here, Evran, do we?
Not really. Not too many presents.
No.
From our favorite team.
No. Perhaps in the news section we can talk about some potential gifts, but we'll see. But before we get into any of that, and it's speculation, and I'm talking about Bernard Mensah and lobbying to the TFF for some justice. But what we do have for sure are some matches to talk about, and we're going to revert to our new format and kind of quickly talk about some of the older matches, and then really focus in on the most recent match, the big one, of course, being the derby. So we're going to talk about our match against Yeni Malatyaspor, the match in the Turkish Cup against 24 Erzincanspor, and then, of course, the big derby, as I said, which we'll focus in on with stats and all of that. But first, just to get this one out of the way, because it was probably the least significant, we've got the Turkish Cup match. It's important to note that Beşiktaş had come into this match with a 3-0 aggregate lead, so things were looking pretty good as far as that goes. Before I talk about the score and how that worked itself out, I will mention the starting lineup, which was, as you might expect, not full of stars. At the back line, we had Utku Yuvakaran again, Kerem Kalafat on the right side, Ridvan Yilmaz on the left side of the defense, Erdoğan Kaya and Necip Uysal on the back line. In the midfield, we had Muhayyer Oktay and Erdem Seçkin, Orkan Çınar with a return. Ozyakup, of course, would come into the match as something of a number 10. Tyler Boyd on the right side, and Mehmet Umut Nair up front. Thoughts on the lineup, Evran?
It was basically what we expected. Just a
full
B/C,
B/C,
squad.
right?
Yeah. So basically, what we were playing in the Europa League, minus 1 or 2 players, and then we got to see Orkan get another chance. It's been a while since we've seen him. Muhayer got to start a game, which not for some reason, because he wasn't in the Europa League squad, so that's why he hasn't been able to play, because he's not a youth player.
Yeah.
So youth players can be brought in, even if they're not in the squad. So he hasn't played in too many games at all, so this was kind of like his opportunity, and then good old Necip and Oğuzhan and Tyler Boyd, so.
Yeah, a couple returnees. I mean, yeah, I suppose Necip Uysal would be the real vet in the squad, leading the team to glory, you could say. Ozan, I mean, to be fair, he was a captain for a while. So
yeah, interestingly enough, in this game, you probably didn't watch because it was at 5 a.m. Eastern, but I braved the storm, and actually Umut Nayir was the captain.
Whoa, how about
even
that?
Even though we had Oğuzhan and Necip on the field, it was interesting.
Yeah, and so this is an important side note, in fact, what you just mentioned. So this match came on at 5 a.m. here in New York City, or on the eastern seaboard of the United States, where you two are, Evran. And
Yes.
I was trying the bold maneuver of assuming I was still young enough to pull an all-nighter. 5 a.m. was going to be a tough wake-up for me. I had that day off, so I was going out that evening for a little bit. And so I thought I could, brave the storm and ride it out the whole night, and maybe just like pass out at 7 a.m. for like 2 or 3 hours or something like that, and then just be tired for a day. But sure enough, I couldn't do it. I ended up passing out on my couch at 2 a.m. And then the funny thing is that my wife and child thought it was funny that I had done it, and as a joke, like, kind of didn't even wake me up. So I ended up like sleeping on the couch till like noon. It was awkward, and I had a bad back. Anyway, but
rough times.
yeah, it's the couch isn't suited for sleeping. Anyway, but so you made it up. You actually braved the storm.
Yeah.
And so what are your comments? I mean, we won't dwell on it too much, because I will, throw it out there now. We lost the match 2-0. Again, we had the 3-0 aggregate, so all in all, it counts as a win, I guess. But how did it go? What did it look like?
Well, I wish I didn't get up at 5 a.m. to watch that, if we're being honest.
Any bright spots?
I mean, not really. Erzincan's a 4th division team. I'll say they're a good 4th division team, but
are they looking for
they're a
promotion?
4th.
Could they maybe be a 3rd division team?
Maybe, but they're still a 4th division team. So you would expect. Like,
I mean, even if they were a 3rd division team, it's not like that would be the
excuse. So I wouldn't say anyone really looked good. Orkan Çınar looked particularly bad.
Nice.
Like really bad. Umut Nayir was pretty isolated. He hit the crossbar at one point on one of his only chances.
Okay.
Muhayer got subbed out in the 15th minute, which is a bit odd. And then the subs were Vida, Lens, and Diaby, so he subbed on all like the starters. But
Yeah, I saw that.
I mean, Lens made a bit of a difference, but nothing crazy. I would have liked to see Kartal Kayra Yilmaz get a chance, but
Yeah, I wondered about that one. He must have
that
been
didn't
injured.
happen.
He was even played unironically, right? In an actual match at one point. So it was sort of weird that he didn't feature here. Maybe they're saving him for the real thing, but it didn't turn out to be true, as we now know.
But overall, no one really stood out for good. There's only players who probably killed their careers. If anything, because I don't think Orkan will ever see the field again. But
what about
Boyd,
Muhayer? How did Muhayer look?
He looked okay. He didn't stand out bad or good. Same thing. He was pretty much similar to Oğuzhan, which is, I guess, not good or bad. Completed his passes, but didn't really
stand out.
Yeah, and you would expect against a 4th division team he could.
Period.
Stand out more.
Yeah.
But same with Boyd, Umut. Utku made a couple of good saves.
What about?
But nothing.
I mean, so the one thing you'd say about like Boyd or even Ozan or even Muhayer, I guess, is like guys like Domagoj Vida, Jermaine Lens, Diaby, right? Like you said, Jermaine Lens actually maybe had a positive contribution. But there are some actual starters for our Super
Yeah.
League team who played in
That came in the 60th minute.
and like Umut Nair even, right? Like he's featured
Yeah, Umut Nair
for
played 90
quite
minutes.
a bit in the Super League. So
Yeah.
it's more problematic that guys like that weren't the difference makers, perhaps. But interesting result. I mean, I think you can also put mentality and psychology at work here. These guys knew that they had a 3-goal cushion, and they saw that they were basically playing with amateurs, relatively speaking. So,
I mean, I guess you would say like the facilities. It was like the type of stadium that they were. It wasn't really a stadium. It was just there was a stand only on one side of the field, and there you had people standing around the field,
nice.
like behind the fence. So it was kind of like equivalent to like a college
Yeah,
facility
it probably
in
felt
the
like a
US.
training match, you know.
But it wasn't like a Sunday league field. The pitch was fine. So, and they still had stuff to prove. All the players except for Nejip, I would say, had something to prove because
Yeah,
I don't think it matters what Nejip
even
does.
Nejip to some extent, right? As far as proving he can like lead guys and tell them what to do, lead the back line. Because like I
feel
mean,
like Nejip can score 6 own goals, so he'll be fine. No one really cares.
somehow,
He's
yeah.
just there. So, but everyone else had something to prove, and no one really proved anything. So, I think it was just a disappointing result all around.
No doubt. Yeah. I mean, any final comments before we move on? Is there? We haven't been drawn against our next opponent yet, right? For the 6th round.
We have.
We
yeah.
have.
We got Erzurum, who just got relegated to the 2nd division. Yeah.
So we're still playing against the 2nd division side, which means these young kids could still have an opportunity to impress.
Yeah.
You'd imagine. You hope.
One of the stronger 2nd division teams. They're currently 1 point outside the top 2. So
I mean, I'd be willing to bet we're still going to see maybe less of a C team and more of a B team, but definitely a B team.
I mean, we have less Europa League game. Well, not less. We have no Europa
we're out
League
of that.
games, so
That's done.
We'll probably see. It's going to be during the transfer season, so maybe 1 or 2 new players will have came in. Maybe. Don't get your hopes up.
Yeah, it's grim. Yeah, and a lot of the starters need rest and recuperation, more specifically, right? Because they've been nursing various injuries, like Burak, right? The linchpin is out again. Which, and he's had a very disappointing season.
That game is January 14th. So we'll have our last competitive game is the 27th, and then we have a break.
Yeah,
So
we'll talk about the
theoretically,
schedule, too.
everyone should be healthy. Theoretically.
You're right. So we got BB Erzincanspor specifically, not the. Did they consume the original Erzincanspor? I think we've had this conversation on air because they've been around.
Not from what I've known them, which is like 2-3 years, just because I remember our old youth player Eslem was on loan there. They were Erzurum did back then too. So I don't know back 20, 30 years. I'm not that old to be following the lower leagues.
Well, no, because Erzincanspor historically had a kind of decent fan base. You know, they're a team that's had a history, but I don't know if the kind of Belediye, the city the municipality is the original team, or I mean, you know how that goes with some of those smaller teams. Sometimes if one team rises, they kind of eat up the other one.
I'm not quite sure. So.
Yeah, I mean that could be research done. We'll talk about that as that approaches. I'll do my research. But there's only one match between here and there. Well, I don't. Let's talk about the past before we go into the future, I guess. Let's go back to the Super League, and so we're gonna go back even further past the Erzincanspor match and talk about Yeni Malatya. We spoke about that match before the game a little bit. Yeni Malatya's had kind of an interesting season. It has you would hardly be able to call it like a wash for them. They came into the season, or they came into our match rather on something of a lull. I think they had been hot for a while and had actually gone pretty high in the Super League, but they had dropped prior to our match. I'm trying to pull up some stats here. My phone is being Bit of a jerk.
Yeah, earlier in the season they were in the Europa League qualifying, and they fell on a bit of a heartbreaker to Partizan. And then they were kind of upper mid-table for a while, and then the last couple games they had 4 ties in a row going in to the Stevas game right before us. So they didn't win in the last 5 games before they played.
Yeah, that's what I had recalled. They'd been on a lull, but obviously still probably hoped to salvage, to get back to where they had been earlier in the year, on a bit of a high still from it, I would imagine. I will say now, a few weeks in advance, they are in 8th place. So they're still within striking distance of the European spot.
Yeah, 5 points outside the top 4, which is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll go further into the table, of course, at the end of all of this. Let's talk a little bit about that Yeni Malatya match. Now, what I have to do, obviously, is talk about the lineups, as always. So yeah, going into this match, we had almost a full strength side. Most of our injuries were resolved. The important one, of course, being Burak Yilmaz. The obvious absence was, of course, on the back line in the way of Victor Ruiz, who, to be fair, we've been without for most of the season thus far, it feels like. But so the lineup was Loris Karius in the goal, Gökhan Gönül and Rebosho on the left side, with Domagoj Vida and Enzo Rocco on the back line, Atiba Hutchinson and El Neni in the back of our midfield, with Adem Ljajic in the number 10 role, Caner Erkin on the left side, and Diaby on the right, with Burak Yilmaz up front. Burak was back. For Ankaragücü, of note, maybe we could talk about Yahovic, Fofana. Fofana is a player I've admired from afar for a while.
Guilherme also.
Yeah, Guilherme has been around the Turkish league, kind of successful in certain ways. They've got Mina, I think Colombian central defender. So a few names. Farnole is their keeper, actually, who played, I guess you could say, well against us anyway. I don't know much about him all in all. One note I will make for Ankaragücü is they have Erkan Kaş on their bench. And another familiar face for some, Gökhan Töre, plays for them. Did you know that?
Yes, I did.
You were a fan, I believe, right? So.
Yes, I was a big Gökhan Töre supporter.
He didn't even feature in the match. They didn't even bring him in.
Yeah.
So again, we're not going to do too much analysis or talk of this one. We're going to focus on the next one. But yeah, we lost 2-0. TFV scored in the 85th minute, and Yahovic, who I mentioned, scored in the 9th. Say what?
TFV Bifuma scored in the 85th minute.
Yeah, and Bifuma, it says Bifuma on the shirt. But, and Yahovic scored in the 9th minute of extra time on a penalty. To just add insult to injury, I suppose. Jeez, what? Any thoughts on this one?
Well, we completely blew this game. It was like
I just have to. I said we weren't going to deep dive into this, by the way, statistically.
Yeah.
I need to mention that we had 1 shot on target, 12 shots in total, but just 1 on target, and again 67% possession. So possession does not win you matches.
And Malatya had 4 shots, including the penalty. So
it's right, and only 3 on target. 3 shots on target, 2 goals.
Yeah, classic FIFA.
Ruthless efficiency. Yeah, that's the kind of game where you hit the reset button. That's not realistic. That's not fair. That's not how football goes. Unless it does, I guess, right?
Well, yeah. So in this game, we were pushing for that winner the whole time.
Yeah.
And then in the 84th minute, Abdullah Avcı made this interesting substitution where he was like, "Let me take off a defensive midfielder El Neni and sub on Güven Yalçın," which is probably the most disastrous substitution in the past, I would say, 5 seasons. I don't think I can remember any worse substitution than this in my life because...
Yeah, for Rebosho, he put on Güven Yalçın.
No, for El Neni, for Güven. Rebosho was Umut Nayir, so there was...
Okay. So I suppose what he did, though, was he switched Ljajic to the wing, Caner to left back, and so we were playing a 4-4-2.
it actually turned into a 4-2-4. So we had Lenz on the right, and then we had Burak Umut up top, and then Güven was like the left winger with their two center mids as Atiba and Lajic. So 4-4-2, 4-2-4.
Right.
But Güven was dropping back, which was awful because 1 minute after it came on,
Yeah.
he dropped back into the box, and Thierry Bifuma completely
Wrecked him.
and utterly destroyed him. He just started cutting back, like shimmying side to side, and Güven actually fell over.
In basketball, they say that's like ruining a man's
Yeah.
career. Like that should end it.
And then he cut back and hit a curling effort from the corner of the box after.
Lovely
making him
shot.
fall
I'll
over.
give him credit for it, you know?
Yeah. And then in the 90+8, he then fouled Bifuma in the box. Very stupidly. So
Yeah, giving them the
game was
penalty.
just completely threw away the game in the last 10 minutes. And then Janer got a red card, second yellow, arguing with the ref after the penalties. That was just a disaster. A game that should have been either a 0-0 tie or a 1-0 win. We somehow lost.
Yeah, and I remember he when he took out Jermaine Lens had been a sort of bright spot for us up to that point. So I
He subbed on Jermaine Lens in that game for Diaby.
oh sorry, Diaby had been a bright spot, and so
Yeah.
I had gosh, my brain is semi-functional. I mean, 'cause to be fair, this was like 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, but yeah. Diaby had been something of a bright spot. Obviously, like that final touch was always a little suspect with him, but he had looked energetic and lively, and Jermaine Lens was the opposite. So that move kind of angered me first, and then obviously the Güven. I mean, the theme here, and this will carry through, I think, for our next match that we're going to talk about, but and it's been the theme for much of the season so far. Abdul Avci's substitutions are daft and terrible and illogical, and I fail to understand them every single time. There have been very few substitutions he's made that I have liked. The only one that I can really speak to that like I was wrong about was I remember he put on Umut Nair once, and I was sort of upset about the sub, and he ended up
Probably the custom pusher game.
yeah, and he ended up scoring right after. But like he put him on for a guy
Twice, yeah.
for like a defender, and it changed it seemed like the wrong move, but it panned out. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, well, he did the exact same substitution pattern actually versus Custom Pasha, where he just in the 60th minute he subbed on Umut Nair for Diaby, and then in the 70th minute he subbed on Lens for Boko, so it was the same thing,
yeah,
just a different order. Janer went back to left back in the 84th minute, and then he also subbed out El Neni for Güven. But at that point, we were playing a man up for 70+ minutes.
yeah. So it's a different
So it
context.
was a little different.
Very different context. And Umut
We didn't
Nair,
have the,
you know how Umut Nair is. It's like putting him on is never like a masterstroke. He just if he scores, he just happens to be in the right place at the right time. And like it's never like a masterful touch or anything. He just does his job. And so credit to him for that and for being in the right place at the right time. But I remember that was a Jermaine Lens who'd actually really made that goal. Well, anyway. Regardless, terrible substitutions resulting in very clearly this time because again, Güven Yalçın came in a minute later. Güven Yalçın gave up the goal, and then a few minutes later he gave them a second goal. So I mean, that's going to be hard for him to recover from.
He hasn't played since. He didn't play in the cup game, which was after this, and not to spoil, but he didn't play in the Fenerbahce game either, which he probably would have played in if he didn't completely embarrass himself.
Yeah, I mean, that poor guy is probably just about done. My cuckoo clock, if you hear that. It's getting super annoying, honestly. I'm about to turn the sound off on it. Like, it was cute for about 2 weeks. Anyway, so yes, let's go to the feature event. Wow, we might actually keep this episode succinct. I always say that, and then we end up talking about, like, arguing about something dumb for, like, 2 hours, and so I have to do all this work in post to make these episodes consumable. But anyway, the big match. So that was obviously a terrible result, Yeni Malatya. Khan and I had spoken to the fact that we needed at least 6 points out of the final 3 matches. 4 at the bare minimum. And we had chalked up Fener as an L. And so it was all about winning against Yeni Malatya. And in this upcoming match against Gençler, which we'll be back to talk about next week. But, so obviously losing against Yeni Malatya, that was a dent. And it put a little pressure on us to try to hopefully get a result against Fener. And this one I'm not going to spoil. We'll do the whole, we'll go through all the match events and all of that. But so, yeah, let's get into it at the very least. We'll talk lineups. So Beşiktaş featured Loris Karius in the goal. Enzo Rocco and Domagoj Vida again on the back line with Gökhan Gönül and Robosho on the wings of the defense. Atiba Hutchinson and El Neni in the back of our midfield. This time, no Ljajic. Diaby would feature behind the striker in more of a central forward role. Jermaine Lenz and Caner Erkin on the wings. Caner on the left, obviously. And Burak Yilmaz would be healthy enough to play against Fener. Victor Ruiz was actually on our bench in this match, which is interesting. I was pretty sure he could not play or was sort of out at least until January, so maybe hope for Gençler. He did practice with the team. There were images of him doing so. What were your thoughts about this one, Evran? The lineup specifically.
Well, it wasn't a good lineup. I understand that a lot of people didn't want Ljajic to play, but he hasn't been in form. But I don't think anyone else has been in good enough
Another
form
note, by the way, not only was Victor Ruiz in practice, with the squad for much of the week prior, but also Georges Kevin and Kudu had been in, with the squad playing for much of the week.
Yeah.
So Beşiktaş put out an image on, I think that Wednesday, with both of them training. So they could have even returned before that Wednesday. But so they had at least 2 days with the team training before that match. So them not featuring maybe an interesting.
Yeah, I'm gonna assume with Avjet, hopefully we're a modern enough club where they wear those heart monitors and they could assess that their match fitness was not at 90 minutes. So I'm assuming coming back from injury, that's why they didn't start. I'm gonna hope. Otherwise, if they were 90-minute fit and they chose not to play, that was.
If Enzo Rocco has played his way above Victor Ruiz.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't know. I'm not an Enzo Rocco hater. I think he's fine, honestly, as a
he's
third.
Certainly not better than
No,
Ruiz.
yeah. I'm comfortable with him as our third central defender.
Third, yes.
But certainly not as the second. Yeah, not as a starter, ideally. Certainly not in a big derby match. And so, yeah, you would hope that was something that, he was really looking out for the team's best interest by not playing Victor Ruiz there. And, of course, Nkudu. Nkudu would come in as a substitute, but we'll talk about that as we go over the match itself. Anything else to say about this? Any comments on Fener's lineup? Maybe we should talk about Fener's lineup.
Fener's lineup?
So they had Altay Bayındır in goal. Jailson and Serdar Aziz on their back line with Nabil Dirar and Isla on the wings of their defense. So that's a fairly aggressive, especially on the wings, with Dirar playing on the back line. Tolga and Luis Gustavo, Tolga Ciğerci, Ozan Tufan played on the wing, and with Deniz Çuruç on the left wing, Ozan on the right, Max Cruz behind, Vedat Murici. Well, I don't know how to pronounce that, but Muric, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, they say Vedat Muric is how they pronounce it.
Yeah, I think it might be Muric. But so yeah, I feel like it was a very quick, aggressive lineup. Fener was clearly coming to ball. They were coming to attack. Although Ozan
it was
on the
about
wing,
what
I still don't
expected.
understand.
Ozan played center mid. Actually, Tolga Ciğerci played on the wing. Usually Ozan plays on the wing, but Emre got hurt kind of last minute, so he didn't play. So then Ozan dropped back in the midfield, and then Gary Rodriguez was suspended, and Victor Moses was also unable to play. So those were like the two speedy wingers, and Emre was out. So that's why there's a little bit of a show.
Yeah, playing a central midfielder on the wing. But so whatever. It can't be criticized in the end. Although I guess let's talk some football. So as far as the timeline of events goes, the match started ugly. I think we were kind of on the back foot from the get-go. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
And it didn't take long. In the 23rd minute, Fener would be awarded a penalty. Rebosho handled the ball. There was a lot of review of it. There's still some debate. Some people say that the ball's trajectory didn't change from the contact, so it wasn't enough. I haven't heard much debate as far as like whether it was intentional enough. But for me, at the time, I thought that was kind of should have been an issue. Although I guess his hands are extended out from his body enough that. Anyway, I mean, what were your thoughts on the penalty itself?
I mean, it was a harsh VAR call. Like, it wasn't. It didn't really affect the play. But we've seen that called before, where the handball has nothing to affect the play, but it did. I mean, it like grazed his knuckle or something. But it did put spin on the ball, which maybe the cross would have came in to a player in the middle. So I guess technically it's a handball, but I'm not sure if it was clear and obvious enough to review. But clearly they thought it was.
Oh, by the way, I didn't even mention that we're playing in the Shukru Saracholos, which we haven't won in since.
I think it's been like 10 plus years.
Oh yeah, I think that was. Where was it? I think it was Kasim Pasha who we hadn't beaten since 2014. We actually reversed that one finally. Of course, not the Fener match. Too much to hope for in this one. But yeah, so
we haven't got a penalty in Fenerbahce Stadium since Guti scored.
Oh, God. So anyway, but they should certainly have, and they did. Max Cruz converting the penalty and giving Fener the 1-0 lead in the 23rd minute. In the 31st minute, German Lenz would get himself a yellow. And in the 32nd minute, shortly thereafter, I think right off of the free kick on a little, they brought it right upfield. And Ozan Tufan, off a nice little assist from Luis Gustavo, just hammered it home.
Yeah, it was a controversial goal because Luis Gustavo and Ozan Tufan kind of like 2v1'd Diaby to win the ball in midfield. He lost the ball, and then Luis Gustavo poked the ball away, and then Ozan Tufan scored from distance. But there was
talk of it being a foul, perhaps. I mean, Diaby was alone for much of this game, and kind of in that scenario where he was sort of dribbling around looking for something to do with the ball, and often had it taken off him. I thought there may have been contact, but at the end of the day, I think it's like 50-50. It didn't go his way. Did they even VAR it?
No.
They didn't.
He listened, but they just said goal.
Yeah.
Rejuvenate the ref.
So that was it. In the 32nd minute, we're down 2-0, and I think at this point, most of us are already in a very dark place, emotionally, mentally, psychologically. In the 33rd minute, Caner Erkin gets himself a yellow card, I think, complaining about that goal and the foul that was not called on Diaby. Much of the team was protesting, actually. I think Atiba especially, although, as always, Atiba complains in a classy way, whereas others, like Caner especially, tend not to. Deniz Turuc got himself a yellow card in the 37th minute. Things are looking a little different. Beşiktaş is on the move. And sure enough, in the 5th minute of extra time in that first half, and there was a lot of extra time because of all the goal scoring and protestations and VAR and for the penalty and all of that, Beşiktaş scored. Caner Erkin assisting Atiba Hutchinson, making it 2-1 right before the half. Give us your color commentary on the goal, Evran.
Another free kick delivery or set piece delivery was taken by Caner. It was from the left side. Kind of just like a knee height cross into the box. Went in behind the defense. Atiba made a good run. He lost his mark and just wasn't like a classic finish. It was actually in the middle of the goal, but he wrong-footed the keeper somehow and had enough power on it. So
yeah. So at this point, right, we're going into the half. Down a goal, but we've come back at least. I mean, how are you feeling at this point? Do you feel like we're in this match? Do we have a chance?
Yeah, I was very cautiously optimistic. I was hoping we could make some substitutions at halftime.
What subs were you looking for?
Nkudu and Lajic, we did get them at some point, but in the end, I don't think it was. Sometimes you can't save some things with substitutions. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, so sure enough, at the half, Lajic would come in and Diaby would come out. Diaby was having a pretty rough match, to be fair, giving away that ball that he was looking for a foul on, of course, which led to the goal. Didn't help his cause overall, but also just generally I felt alone, and this is problematic in and of itself because he was the guy playing behind a striker. So you could really point to Burak Yilmaz and his complacency and kind of static. He has yet to really show himself this season. Apart from maybe that one match where he scored a brace, we just haven't seen it from him. And so
the mighty Kayserispor.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And so, the fact that Diaby looked like he was out on an island for much of this match is really a bad look for the squad and their construction all around. Especially, I think, Burak and his role as far as, the one thing you expect from him, even when he's not in good form, is that he's going to run into space and, weigh down defenders. And so, him not doing that made, I think, Diaby's struggle all the more pronounced. And so I think in a way Diaby's the fall guy there, but that's the move that was made at halftime. I mean, do you agree with my sort of analysis on that? Generally,
well, I do think it was partly the systemic issue. I definitely think Diaby was poor on the ball.
No, he was.
If you look at the numbers, I mean, he wasn't awful, but he definitely lost the ball more than he kept it. All those things.
But he was again. But didn't that feel that he was? Didn't it look like he was kind of on an island though? Like he didn't have much. He had nowhere to go with the ball. He was running around, kind of darting around, looking for someone, and inevitably he'd lose it, which was partially often because of his bad pass, but also in part often because there didn't seem to be much support for him, formation-wise.
I do think it was partially not his fault, but at the same time, I think Lajic looked better when he came on in terms of completing his passes and not losing the ball. So, I mean,
definitely, yeah, no, for sure. And so, yeah, that was of note. So, Lajic came in, things looked better, but it wouldn't take long till in the 58th minute, from Isla, a nice assist, you've got to say. Ball drops to Vedat Muric, who would put it away. Also a nice finish. 58th minute, Fener is up 3-1, and that really felt like the nail in the coffin. Give us the color commentary on the goal.
Well, I think it's worth noting that about 1 to 2 minutes before, Burak Yilmaz had a 100% goal chance that he decided to completely squander because Gileson fell over. And he was by himself through on goal, tried to dribble the goalie and failed to do so. And then
honestly, that felt like we had done so much in build up to that point. It felt like we'd gotten ourselves back in the match, and that really felt like the moment where it all came undone. I'll be honest, even before they scored. Within
2 minutes or so, Isla made a good run to the end line.
It almost felt like that was the counter to that miss, or at least that was maybe that's how it feels afterwards, Yeah. But
good run to the end line, cut it back. Muric just a little bit lucky. The side foot finish squirmed under Karius' legs. He got a touch to it, but not enough, and it went in. So
I've got to say, I always felt like Fener getting Mauricio Isla was a bit of a coup on their part that was sort of glossed over often. We never really talk much about it. I think that transfer window they had gotten so many players that one came late in the window and it wasn't talked about as much as some of the other bigger names they'd gotten. But he's been steady for them, and I've always liked his game. I've always felt it would match the Turkish league because he's physical but fast. Bit of a snake, honestly. But that fits this league. Anyway, in the 63rd minute, Nkudu would come in for Robosho, and that would be our sort of cue to go to the 4-4-2 that we've been sort of reverting to. One interesting note, in the 75th minute, Ferdi Kadiolu would come in for Denis Suruc, which many of our listeners will remember. We had pretty much like announced he was coming to Beşiktash. I think it was last summer, 2 summers ago. So yeah, he would appear against us. At this point, the game was dull. I think probably we looked the more likely, but still, Fener was really dangerous on the counter, and we were disappointingly not aggressive, for a team that's losing in a derby by 2 goals. I felt. El Neni got a yellow card in the 77th minute. Serdar Aziz in the 79th minute also got a yellow. Tolgay Arslan would come in the 86th minute. They probably hoped that he could score and just like put the stab us in the hearts funny. A little.
Tolgay hasn't scored since either the Liverpool game or the Cup game. That was within a week of that. That was the last time he scored a goal. So
imagine he did score against us. That would have been the knife in the heart. But anyway, so in the 87th minute, Umut Nair came in for Burak Yilmaz, whose game could be dubbed at that point a complete failure. In that first minute of extra time, Jorgensen would come in for Tufan. I feel like that a club like Fener having a guy like Jorgensen who doesn't even start for them is like a flex. They're clearly in a better place than we are, roster-wise, talent-wise. You wouldn't have known going into the match and looking at the table. But yeah, that's how it would end. 3-1. Beşiktaş takes the big L, the Derby L.
Yeah, big fat L.
Thoughts, man? What do you have to say? We'll talk about stats in a second. I'll talk main stats. You can go into the advanced stats. But before we do that, like general summation, how did you feel about this whole thing?
Well, we got although we got zero help from the refs, and we probably could have had 1 or 2 penalties, and then VAR didn't help us at all the entire game. And I think that's what most of the controversies around is just really disappointing to go into a game and us just not be very good. Although things,
that should be the main come away.
If we get a penalty or if Burak can score, his 100% chance, you would think at 2-2 maybe the game goes different. Instead, we completely lost the momentum as it went the opposite 3-1. But at no point did we really look like the better team. We
deserved it.
The game plan was almost non-existent. There's no build out from the back, almost no tiki-taka. El Neni's looked completely useless, I'm not going to lie. It was Atiba at his big age of 36, trying to carry the whole midfield burden on his own.
He even scored. He literally did everything for us.
The verticality of building from defense into midfield is still awful, which we saw from the beginning.
Yeah, I've complimented the El Neni Atiba matchup, but also commented on how unlikely it all looked. And sure enough, I feel like this is why it was unlikely to be successful, because this is kind of what you'd expect, right? Too much sideways action.
I can't imagine Arsenal put an 18 million euro buyout clause, and that's obviously not going to happen. He doesn't like. It's not like he's awful. It's just he passes the ball backwards literally every single time, and usually the midfielder next to Atiba is the more creative player, and he's the opposite. Watching Enzo Rocco trying to play splitting passes from the back was almost nauseating. That Rocco was one of our better players. He's not awful on the ball, but if Rocco is the player trying to push the initiative, you have an issue.
Oh yeah,
things need to change. Players need to change. Hopefully, maybe coaching tactics have to change. I'm not going to say coaching has to change, but there's a lot.
That would be a bold statement at this stage, but yes. Excuse me. Let's talk about stats, because I think the stats back up just how. So Beşiktaş, if the one thing we could always hang our hat on was possession, that was nullified for the most part. Possession actually only went in Beşiktaş's favor by 2%, 51% to 49. So just barely. And that's coming from a side that's down by 2 goals for a big chunk of this match. So that's really unimpressive. Another sort of change here. Passes completed were 369 by Beşiktaş to only 358 for Fener. Now, Fener completed their passes at a 73% accuracy rate, which is fairly terrible. But Beşiktaş completed only 75% of their passes, which is one of our worst matches of the season. So our generally solid midfield and sort of possession-based tactic was clearly undone by whatever Fener did tactically. So that can be deciphered immediately just from these basic statistics. Fener had 17 shots, 6 on target, to Beşiktaş's 7 and 2. Beşiktaş had 2 shots on target in a derby match. 2 shots. That's not fun. That was not fun to watch. Beşiktaş committed 21 fouls to Fener's 18. 3 yellow cards to their 2. I mean, what can you really say? Fener was called offsides 5 times to Beşiktaş's twice, which speaks to the aggressive, attacking nature of their plan on the day. 9 corners to Beşiktaş's 5. So certainly they were the aggressors in this match.
Yup.
You have any advanced stats to add to that, Evran?
Yeah.
I mean, those stats tell a story, I'll say. Because
I have my my more nerdy stats coming in. I think just some things I will show is individual duels, 1/lost. Fenerbahçe had a pretty significant advantage. I mean, nothing like absurd, but 59 duels won to 48 lost. Obviously, we're the inverted, so their individual battles went their way. Passes completed for Beşiktaş was almost the same in our own half to the opponent's half. So when we were in possession, it was largely meaningless possession. Fenerbahçe had a much more of their passes completed in our half compared to their own half, so their possession was more progressive and offensive-minded. And obviously, if you're in the opposing half, you're more likely to score. That's pretty common sense. In terms of expected goals, including the penalty, they had a 2.38 xG. Ours was 0.59, which I think is a little bit lower because Burak didn't actually shoot the ball when right before his goal. So that probably would have brought us to about 1.1, 1.2. But still, they had a better xG than us. Our xG in the open play was 0.02. So basically all our chances except for that Burak one came from set pieces, which Elneny had 1 chance and Atiba scored the 1. In terms of our passes, Caner played the most passes, which I'm not sure if
interesting.
Something we want.
No, definitely not. Considering he's on the wing anyway, right?
Yeah.
You definitely want that ball to be held somewhere in the
Usually
midfield. I mean, obviously, when you have 2 defensive midfielders in, that's going to be harder to predict, I guess, in that sense. But man,
Lens
shouldn't be
was a bit
Caner.
of a-
You'd hope it would be Ljajic or Diaby, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, typically it's that ball-playing midfielder next to Atiba, but Elneny's not really been. He doesn't even look like he wants to get on the ball half the time.
I mean, in his defense, he shouldn't be that. He should be the replacement for Atiba, and there should be someone who's more of a central midfielder. This is a problem that we've talked about a lot.
I don't think
persists.
He can replace Atiba when Atiba consistently outperforms him. Those,
but he's 36
for percentages, and then in terms of XG chain, which is passes leading up to shots, Atiba was our best player.
No, I mean I don't think one could. When I say that he's our best player this season, I don't think I'd get a single argument from anyone I've spoken to about Beşiktaş regularly. I mean, who's had a better season than Atiba for Beşiktaş this year? All in all,
maybe Vida, maybe.
I don't even think so, honestly. Because remember, Vida had a rough start this season initially. I mean, it's insane that we're saying this about a 36-year-old, the guy who we probably said the same thing about like 4 years ago. Anyway, here we are. I guess wrap us up on Fener, man. Is there a silver lining to this? Did anyone play okay?
Atiba.
Besides Atiba.
I guess Janer was probably he did his usual let me cross as much as I can because I can't do much else. And it sort of worked, but I don't think it barely worked when we had Quaresma, who's just, I think we can all agree, in his prime, which was a far superior attacking player. So to put the same role onto Janer at this point is probably not the best thing, especially with, Abdullah Abjeth. We're promised, a system or all this fancy technology, maybe futuristic coaching. No more Channel Ganesh 4-2-3-1 Quaresma. That's what we're all promised, but
I think we can definitely say that when we are starting Janer Erkin and Germain Lenz on our wings in a derby match in 2019, right? Like after Germain Lenz has pretty much been destroyed by Channel Ganesh systematically for years, and kind of proven himself to be at best kind of depth for us on the wing. To be starting in our most important match of the season to date, that's big. That's big problem. And Janer being the opposite guy, considering that we invested in our wings quite a bit. No good. Just no good. Any other points about this match before we talk about the table?
Well, I don't think we can support not playing Laic anymore, even if he's out of form. Just pretty clearly we're not better without him. And then with Dorukan out, something has to change in that defensive midfield position because El Neni and Atiba is not it. I would just say Atiba is fine, but
that combo looked good for like 4 matches during that stretch.
It looked okay. I don't think it's ever looked good.
It looked good relatively, right? Like that was like what we had going for us. But it wasn't supposed to be sustainable, right? Like playing with 2 defensive midfielders, especially in the Super League, right? We're Beşiktaş. We're not like, if in the Champions League, perhaps there's some sense in having to focus in that regard on sort of defense in the midfield. But what are we supposed to make of the fact that we're doing this against like mid-table sides in Turkey?
Yeah.
But so. Let's talk about the standings here. Let's talk about where that leaves us. We're gonna be playing Gençler, as I mentioned, in their final match of this first half of the season, which I'll preview a little bit after this. But in the standings right now, after 16 games played, Beşiktaş is in 5th place with 27 points. Behind now Fener, who have 28 points. They passed us by beating us. Behind Trabzon, who has 29 points. Başakşehir on 30. And so those are the 3 teams that are within striking distance, in just 1 week, if things were to go our way. We could theoretically end this season still in 2nd place if those 3 sides managed to drop all their points and we didn't. I don't know how the goal differential works out, or so. I'm not even sure if that's true, to be honest. But in theory, we could go up as high as 2nd, maybe 3rd, if everything went our way going into the break. But that would require a lot of good luck, and still, it wouldn't put us on top of the table because still up top. What the hell is going on? Sivasspor with 34 points. Sivas.
Yeah.
Freaking 7 points ahead of us now. Beşiktaş, we're losing ground. Can we even catch them? Mathematically. Sivas. Now, obviously, there's a lot of season left. There's still the entire second half of the season. In fact, plus 1 match. I still expect Sivas to come to earth. What's the expression? Fall back to earth, or whatever it is. Drop. What is the expression?
Not sure.
Come back down to earth.
Like
come back down to earth. Jeez, there it is. I'm still expecting that, but I don't know, man. Going into we can definitely say that come the halfway mark of the season, they will be in first place because they have a 4-point lead on Trabzon, on Başakşehir to be on top. So they are going to end the first half of the season as the midway champs. So I don't really know what to say about that. Besides, congrats to like the 18 fans in Sivas. But man, what do you know? So there we are. That's where we stand going into this upcoming match against Gençler, which will be on Friday. So stay tuned for that one, folks. We have that one coming up pretty soon, actually. On Friday, December 27th. It's 12:30 for those of us here in the eastern United States. So I believe that means 5:30 or 6:30 for Khan in Western Europe there, and then maybe like 7:30 or even 8:30 in Turkey. So we're back to normal for us anyway. No more 5 a.m. nonsense.
Yeah.
A lunchtime match.
That was tough.
During our holiday break, so at least we'll all be home. Yeah, what are your thoughts about Gençler and where we are right now? I suppose we should talk a little news before we end this episode, but yeah, I mean, preview this one for us, Evran.
Gençler really.
So remember, no Burak, right?
Burak is out. Hopefully Ruiz will come back in the 11. And personally,
and Nkudu.
Personally, I think Oğuzhan should be given one more shot in that defensive mid role next to Atiba. And then hopefully Nkudu can start. Yeah, Laic can start, and then whoever he wants on the right, not John Air on the midfield again. Hopefully, I mean, we're at home. Just get the win. Don't play like trash, and then reconvene for second half.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. Definitely. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit of news then. Evran, I feel like I've just talked so much. You should tell us the news. Tell us about what's up, I guess. So we mentioned briefly Bernard Mensah. Give us a little, feed us in as the native Turk speaker here. The real Turk.
I guess, Kayserispor, where he plays, is obviously struggling. They're in last place. All their players are leaving. They're big names. They're not getting paid. Club's in complete disarray. They paid $3.6 million to sign him permanently. And now there's rumors that he'll leave in January, either on a free transfer or cut price, because supposedly he's not being paid. So Beşiktaş and Galatasaray are both interested. So he's
and so he is a central midfielder. Yeah. He's playing more in the number 10 role for Kayseri, but he could fill that role that you were talking about. How we need to give Ozan one more shot.
Yeah,
that could solve that problem, certainly.
Potentially. Yeah.
You and I'm not so sure about Khan. We wanted to see us sign Azubuike. I remember at the beginning in the summer. Mm-hmm. So he fits that kind of the African void that we're missing. I think
he's a little bit different. Less.
No, I just mean he's African. We don't have any Africans. We need an African player. I don't. I have no idea why. We need to check off a diversity box.
My personal African pick for that position is Etebo, because Stoke City can no longer afford him.
We should have more than one African.
So I like to loan him in with an option to buy the Nigerian, but
let's get them both.
I'm not a sport.
Let's get them both. So. And Mensah makes sense financially, I suppose, because of all the side stuff that you mentioned. Another bit of rumored gossip that we can talk about, and we'll obviously have more of these kinds of conversations in the off season, because that's when all the news will be coming in hot and heavy. But supposedly, this is the bad news side of the transfer window. Certain folks are on their way out. Orkan Çınar, goodbye, probably forever on permanent deal. Muhayyer, we're looking to loan out, I believe. And Ozan is a goodbye scenario.
Supposedly.
And Tyler Boyd as well. Now, I can't speak to the veracity of this. This is Beşiktaş International goons that are sort of spreading information or misinformation. It hopefully is. I personally feel that giving up on Tyler Boyd now would be a terrible decision. I think he's at worst our third best winger on the roster at the moment. I think Nkudu is number one. Sadly, Ljajic is probably number two, and then I think Tyler Boyd. I still have him above Jermaine Lens. Maybe not as far as form, but certainly as far as like value and kind of overall ability, potential, all that stuff kind of wrapped into one. Thumb up or thumb down. I would give it to Tyler Boyd.
Same.
So I feel like that would be a terrible decision. So hopefully the veracity of this is null, and there is none, and this is just nonsense. Doruk, I blame you for this if it's not true.
They're all
and I just
possible.
blame you for most of my problems in general, Doruk. If you're listening. I'm just kidding, you jerk. But yeah, there's another bit of news, and I'm going to hand this one to you too, Evran. There's Ahmet Nur Çebitok, as far as the referees and the Fener match specifically, but maybe a general complaints as well.
Yeah. Our president came out in a press conference and said that he wants the VAR tapes or conversations from the game to be released. He wants more transparency, and that the refereeing has been a scandal. He claims is very slanted against Beşiktaş, which there is statistical evidence to suggest that fact, as well as visual evidence. But this is probably the first time we've complained about refereeing since I don't even know. Last time I think we complained was when we protested that Fenerbahce game.
It's a sad reflection of the sport in Turkey that one of the central roles of a team's president is to kind of publicly complain about refs, and I think it's a precedent that's been set by I would say mostly Galatasaray, although Fener has done it quite a bit, especially in the old days of Aziz Yildirim.
Yeah, Gala is the chief complainer.
But Galatasaray, they've always been the instigators in this regard, and they've really set this standard of presidents having to kind of come out and complain publicly. Obviously, the main problem here are the refs themselves. I find it hard to believe that Galatasaray would be the ones who set that precedent, given how often the refs seem to help them. Although I think, all in all, I've always felt that Fener had the most help from refs historically. So it's sort of fitting that this would come up after a Fener match, I suppose. But yeah, man. Thanks for the news, Evran. The translation. So, Evran, I think that's all we've really got to say this time around. Obviously, stay tuned for Gençler and our final match review of 2019. Stay tuned for... we have some great off-season content for the new year. We're going to do a Team of the Decade episode. Obviously, Evran, you'll be back for that. And Khan will be back, and we're going to get kind of after the beeps and messages from some of our favorite listeners and Beşiktaş international contributors and all of that. The twins, our Scottish twins. Hopefully we'll make a return in that segment. But so yeah, we'd like to hear from you, the listeners, about who your all-time or favorite Beşiktaş 11 is from the last decade. That is from 2010 to 2020. Oh my god, I'm so old. But so yeah, I'll leave reminders of that in the notes for this episode and up on Twitter. Preview real quick, Evran. Who's your top player of the decade? Like we don't know. Of course, it's Evran. If you haven't figured that yet, player of all time, maybe, right? Quaresma, your boy
of the millennium,
of the galaxy, probably, right? Because we know someone's playing this sport somewhere else, and he's better than them too. Okay. So that's a little sample of what you're gonna get, like we didn't know. But yeah, so stay tuned for that. Follow us on Twitter. You can follow my man Evran here at fan of BJK. No underscores, right?
No.
fan of BJK. Follow myself at Sir_Writes_a lot. You can follow our other contributor, Khan, at Razarian, RAZZERIAN. No Z's on this podcast today. We say Z the proper way. Besides that, follow us, follow the podcast at Eagles_podcast. You don't say Z, do you, Evran?
No, sir. No, sir.
Come on, what is that? Yeah. Nonsense. English speak. Brit speak. All right, but so yeah, I'm going to take us out here. It was a pleasure chatting with you guys on Christmas Eve. You hear the Christmas bells ringing, of course, as we take us out of this episode and almost take us out for the year. I do believe we'll be back for one more episode this year. Stay tuned. Everyone, hope for the best for Beşiktaş against Gençler. We need these 3 points at the very least. As always, let's go Beşiktaş!
You.
We did it, everyone. Did you hear about Mandzukic going to Arabia?
Yeah.
It sucks. I would have left Mandzukic maybe like 4 years ago.
Yeah, no more money. No more money's left in the tank.
I mean, how much could he need? I guess probably to
4 or
make
5.
that step. Yeah.
Plus, they probably pay the transfer fees.
Those Arabian teams. They have no trouble saying that. They never have.
Beşiktaş International hopes you enjoyed this program.